Hello, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be going over 3 trig ACT math questions, along with one bonus question I have for you guys at the end of this video. For all these questions, I recommend you pausing the video first and trying out the questions before I solve them. Without wasting any time, let's get into it. So this first question says, in the right triangle below, the measure of angle C is 90 degrees. It says AB is 5 units and CB is 2 units. And it asks us for tan of B. So for this, you need to know what SOHCAHTOA is. So SOHCAHTOA tells us that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. It tells us cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And it tells us tangent is opposite over adjacent. So for this problem, we are only concerned with tangent because it asks us to find tan of B. So we don't have to worry about sine and cosine. So first, let's label angle B. That's angle B. So to find tan of B, we need to find the opposite side and the adjacent side. So the opposite side would be this. Let's just label this x for now. And then the adjacent sign is 2. So we know tan of B is going to be x over 2. But now if you look at the answer choices, there is no answer of x over 2. That means we need to find what side this is. What this side is. In order to do that, we use the Pythagorean theorem. And that is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's call this is x, right? Let's say this is b, let's say this is c, and then actually let's change this to a. So we know b is 2, so it's going to be a squared plus b squared. Since b is 2, it's going to be 4, which equals c squared. And c is 5, so that's going to be 25. And if we solve for a, we get a equals root 21, plus or minus. But remember, a side can't be negative, so just going to be plus. It's going to be positive root 21. So since a is root 21, tan of b is going to equal root 21 over 2. And because we figured that out earlier, that tan of b equals a over 2. And we just found out that a is root 21. So tan of b is going to be root 21 over 2. So the answer to the first question is F. On to the next question. In triangle ABC, shown below, the measure of angle B is 41, the measure of angle C is 34, and AB is 25 units long. Which of the following is an expression for the length in units of BC? So for this question, you should use the law of sines, which is sine of A over A, which equals sine of B over B. So what the law of sines tells us is that if we divide any side by the sine of the angle across from it, we get the same value every time. So I'll show you an example of that in this question, because we're going to be using law of sines. So to solve this question, we are given that angle C is 34 degrees. So sine 34. This is going to help us find this side. Let's call this x. Sine 34 over 25. So your sine of the angle opposite from 25 equals this sine of this angle. And to find that angle, you need to know that all angles in a triangle add up to 180. So this would be 180 minus 75, which is 105. So this angle is 105 degrees. So sine of 105 divided by the side across from it, which is, in this case, x. So this is how law of sines works. And this allows us to basically find missing sides or even missing angles. So now all you do is cross multiply to find x. So you would do 25 sine 105. This is the cross multiplication, by the way. set that equal to sine 34x, divide to solve for x. And let's see what that matches with. It matches with B, so your answer is B for this question. All right, on to the third question, which states a cosine function is shown in the standard xy coordinate plane below. And it says one of the following equations represents this function, and it says which one. So to find the correct answer, we can use a graph, and we can figure out the amplitude and the period from the graph. And I covered this in my previous video titled the ACT math questions you should know. I recommend checking that out. So let's solve this. So to find the amplitude from a graph, it's the distance from the midline, which is y equals 0, to one of your peaks. So any of these. So the distance from the midline, y equals 0, to your peak is 3. So that means your amplitude is 3. And in the equation, the amplitude is just the number in front of your trig function. So in this case, the number in front of cos. So it's not f or g. Now let's move on to finding the period from the graph. One thing to notice here is that each of these tick marks, let me use a different color. So red, each of these tick marks is pi over 2. So this means this would be pi, this would be negative pi over 2, and this would be negative pi. So to find the period is simply the horizontal distance from one peak to another, or basically the horizontal distance a point needs to travel in order to like replicate itself in a consecutive cycle. So what I mean by that is like when this pattern appears again. So like, for example, it could be the distance from here to here. This is the period. The distance from this point to this point. Let me use this color. So the distance from this point to this point. The distance from this point to this point. So the period is just the horizontal distance a point needs to travel in order to like replicate itself again, for that pattern to replicate itself in the function. So since we're going from 0 to pi, the horizontal distance is pi, which means our period is pi. And to find the period from an equation, we need to know the formula 2 pi over b, which gets you the period, and our period is pi. So if we solve for b, we get b to be 2, as the pi's cancel out. And if we look here, b is just the number next to x. And here, the number is either, for h and j, the number is 1/3 and 1/2, which is not what we're looking for. So you can cancel those out. You can cross those out. So it's going to be k. So your answer to this question is k. Now let's move on to the bonus challenge question. Well, actually, one more thing I would like to point out is that if you don't know how to find the amplitude and period from a graph, you can always just plug in points. So for example, I could plug in like 0 for x, and I would still be able to get the answer. So if I plug in 0 for x, I get 3 cos of 0, and cos of 0 is 1. So I get y equals 3. So that means one of my points is going to be 0, 3. And again, that appears on the graph, 0, 3, that's a point. So you could just plug in points and see which equation matches the graph. Now, let's move on to the bonus question. So the bonus challenge question is, if sine theta plus cos theta equals 1/2, what is the value of sine theta times cos theta? So pause the video and give this a try, and then I'll solve it. Okay, so for this question, you need to know the identity sine theta squared plus cos theta squared equals 1. And why this is important is because if you were to look at this and if you had no idea what to do, your best bet would be to square this, and I'll show you why. If you were to square this, you would get sine theta squared plus 2 sine theta cos theta plus cos theta squared. equals 1/4. So now if you square this, if you know this identity, you can identify that this can be rewritten as sine theta squared plus cos theta squared. It's 2 sine theta cos theta. And if you know this identity, you can just replace this with 1. This is just 1. So this would become 1 plus 2 sine theta cos theta equals 1/4. And then now you can solve for sine theta cos theta, because that's what we're solving for. So you could treat this as like one big variable x. I'm just going to keep them, I'm not going to replace it with a variable. But you would want to get sine theta cos theta by itself. So you would subtract 1 from the left side, which would get you 2 sine theta cos theta equals 1/4 minus 1, which is -3/4. And then now simply just divide by 2 to solve for sine theta cos theta. And you get sine theta cos theta equals -3/8. Because -3/4, 1/2, reciprocal, you're multiplying by the reciprocal, and you get -3/8. So sine theta cos theta would equal -3/8. And this identity really helps you to solve this bonus challenge question. And I think this is a good question. And yeah. So these were the 4 questions. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.